Tom Selleck, the man whose face became synonymous with quiet courage, unshakable morality, and a rare kind of on-screen sincerity, has carved his place not only in the hearts of millions, but in the very spine of American television. Through roles like Thomas Magnum in Magnum PI and Frank Reagan in Blue Bloods, he offered viewers more than entertainment. He gave them someone to believe in, someone steady, someone timeless. For decades, he embodied characters who felt less like fiction and more like a comforting truth. From a gentler era now almost out of reach. But today, at 80, behind that calm, wise gaze lies a life softened by grief and tightened by the quiet ache of an aging body. A life caught between gratitude and unspoken sorrow. He carries losses that never made headlines, burdens he never invited sympathy for, and memories that still press against him like shadows. Determined to test the heart of a man who spent most of his life giving light to others, there are chapters the public never saw: sacrifices, heartbreaks, and lonely moments that linger long after the applause has faded. If Tom Selleck ever made you smile, ever inspired you, let a simple like be your silent tribute to a man who gave the world far more than he ever received in return. His story begins in a home warmed by love, but shaped by quiet hardship. Born in 1945 in Detroit, Tom entered a world still healing from the ruins of war. Stability was precious, and nothing came without effort. His father, Robert, a disciplined man with a stern glance but a steady heart, worked tirelessly in real estate. Not for wealth, but to keep a family of 6 grounded. His mother, Martha, kept the home alive with warmth and gentle strength, stretching every resource, never letting the children feel the weight of scarcity. In 1952, when Tom was 7, the family packed their entire world into a few suitcases and moved to Sherman Oaks, California. It wasn't Hollywood they were chasing, it was hope. A chance for something a little better. In that sun-drenched suburb just outside Los Angeles, Tom grew up close enough to glimpse the city's glitter, yet far enough to remain grounded. He was thoughtful, reserved, more likely to listen than to lead. Even as a child, he understood that life could be unfair, but he also believed it could be meaningful. The Sellecks didn't own fancy cars or travel on luxurious vacations. Their wealth lived in discipline, honesty, humility, values that became the core of Tom's character. "My parents gave me something money couldn't buy," he would later say. "They taught me to stay steady when life isn't." Those weren't just words. They were the map of his life. Sports became his escape. Basketball his quiet obsession. Through long practices and tough losses, he learned resilience. Coaches admired his discipline. Teachers noted his manners. But Tom never saw himself as extraordinary, just someone trying to do things right, one small step at a time. His father's expectations could be strict, and the home sometimes felt smaller than the dreams inside it. But no one complained. Love filled the spaces where comforts could. Then, at 17, his life shifted in a single heartbeat. A sudden car accident, ordinary in appearance, devastating in impact. Though his injuries were not catastrophic, the experience left a deeper imprint than any scar. It taught him that youth is fragile and that the people you love can be snatched away in an instant. Friends watched him return to the court weeks later, still determined, though a little slower, a little more thoughtful. But inside, something had changed. He now understood how short time really is. In 1962, through sheer persistence, he earned a basketball scholarship to the University of Southern California, not because he was the flashiest athlete, but because he was reliable, steady, the kind of teammate who made others better. He majored in business administration, imagining himself following his father into real estate. Acting was nowhere in his plans, yet fate was already quietly working on its own script. Those early years were not without struggle, but every challenge shaped him, molding a young man who would one day face unimaginable pressures with grace. The boy who once measured success by points scored would grow into a man who measured it by promises kept, responsibilities honored, and dignity maintained even under the heaviest weight. And then, in 1965, just as Tom was completing his degree, destiny knocked softly. An unexpected invitation from a drama coach. One simple class, one modest step into a world he had never imagined altered everything. A path he hadn't chosen began to open before him, quietly transforming the future of the boy from Sherman Oaks, long before he realized where it would lead. On stage, Tom discovered something he never expected: a discipline unlike sports, a unity unlike any team he had known, and a way to reach people without ever raising his voice. Acting became less a performance and more a calling, a quiet place where he could express truths he never put into words. Determined to honor that fragile spark, he took whatever work he could find. Nameless figures in the backgrounds of TV shows, commercials for cola brands, and shaving creams. Anything that allowed him to stay close to the craft. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't celebrated, but for the dream just beginning to take shape, it was survival then. In 1967, at only 22, that slow, hopeful momentum came crashing down. A draft notice arrived sudden, blunt, and unavoidable. Without hesitation, Tom answered the call. He joined the California Army National Guard, serving 6 long, demanding years with the 160th Infantry Regiment. "I never thought about what it might cost me," he would later say, voice steady. "I just knew it was something I had to do." But the cost was real, and it grew heavier with each passing year, in an industry obsessed with youth and timing. 6 years away wasn't a break, it was an erasure. By the time he returned to civilian life in 1973, whatever doors had begun to crack open were now shut tight. There was no welcome back, no promised opportunity waiting, just the cold truth that he was older, unknown, and now competing against newcomers who had spent the years he sacrificed building their futures. He started again from nothing. Guest spots, one-line appearances, blink and dual my-sit roles. And when the rejections came, and they came often, they arrived quietly, without apology. 6 different television pilots offered him the miracle of a breakthrough, only for all 6 to be cancelled before the public ever saw them. Each time, he would take the call, thank his agent, hang up, and fold the script with slow, almost ceremonial care, like burying a dream that never had the chance to live. "You start to wonder if you're rehearsing for a dream that isn't yours to keep," he admitted years later. The grind was ruthless, the paychecks thin, and each passing season stretched the distance between where he stood and where he longed to be. Yet he refused to break. He kept walking into auditions. He kept training at the Beverly Hills Playhouse. He kept accepting roles others dismissed as insignificant, believing that mastery earned in anonymity was still mastery worth having. By the late 1970s, patience finally began to bear its first fragile fruit. Casting directors had started to remember him not because of fame or flash, but because of the quiet steadiness he brought to every frame, a grounded authenticity that made scenes feel lived in. That quality caught the attention of producers of The Rockford Files, where he was cast as Lance Witta, private investigator whose understated charm and calm strength mirrored the man playing him. Audiences noticed, critics noticed, and for the first time in more than a decade, the tide seemed to turn. Yet behind every smile was the memory of the silent years, the closed doors, the sacrifices made without applause. Those lean years shaped him far more than success ever would. They taught him to endure, to rebuild, to walk with dignity even when no one was watching. The tide that once resisted him finally surged forward in 1980 when, at 35, Tom Selleck stepped into the role that would define a generation. Thomas Magnum in Magnum PI almost overnight. The mustache, the Hawaiian shirts, the effortless smile, and that quiet sense of honor turned him into a cultural icon, a presence in millions of American homes. Someone viewers trusted as if they knew him personally, but behind the charm lay a punishing reality few understood. Magnum PI was a weekly, hour-long drama shot largely in Hawaii under the punishing sun, 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, 8 seasons straight. The schedule devoured holidays, erased birthdays, and reduced family moments to hurried flights squeezed between shooting days. "It was the best job I ever had," Tom would reflect, "but it took more out of me than I realized." Behind that admission was a truth audiences never saw. The quiet cost of being everyone's hero. And even as he stood at the height of his fame, fate delivered one of its cruelest blows. In 1981, a legendary film role slipped from his grasp, not because he wasn't right for it, not because he failed an audition, but because he honored the contract that had given him Magnum. That single act of integrity cost him a place in cinematic history, a heartbreak he carried for years, a painful reminder that in Hollywood, loyalty can demand the highest price. Still, he pushed forward. Scripts were rewritten overnight, networks applied pressure, expectations soared, and every week he carried the weight of a nation, watching, waiting for him to be perfect. When Magnum PI finally ended in 1988, at 43, the sudden stillness felt like a void. After years of non-stop motion, the quiet was disorienting. The industry that once chased him now hesitated, unsure whether he could ever step out of Magnum's shadow. Roles came, but so did comparisons. Some projects promised a new beginning but collapsed before release. Every disappointment felt sharper under the public's gaze. Yet through it all, Tom refused to betray the principles that had guided him from boyhood. He chose roles that felt honest, even if it meant saying no to lucrative offers. Even if it meant enduring the ache of work that slipped away. casting directors still saw in him that rare ability to ground a moment, to steady a scene, to make truth feel effortless. And over time, that rare steadiness carried him into roles that proved his depth, his range, and his ability to endure. Yet the paradox of his success never disappeared. A life glowing with fame on the outside, while privately marked by the quiet, heartbreaking cost of maintaining it. Those years taught Tom more than how to lead a hit show. They taught him the price of staying true to himself, the discipline to carry expectations without bending, and the grace to survive the lonely places no spotlight can touch. Most of the world would always remember him as Magnum, but anyone willing to look closer would see a man who met triumph and sacrifice in equal measure, and kept walking with his head held high. At the height of Magnum PI in the early 1980s, Tom Selleck seemed to be living a dream. The charming smile, the rugged look, the red Ferrari. He was the man who always had the answer. But away from the cameras, the truth was far from effortless. In 1982, just as his career exploded, the foundation of his personal life collapsed. His 11-year marriage to Jacqueline Ray ended in quiet devastation. To the public, it was one more Hollywood breakup. To Tom, it was, as he once said, the worst thing that ever happened to me. They had married in 1971, long before fame, when he was barely getting auditions, barely paying bills. Jacqueline believed in him without hesitation. He adopted her young son Kevin, and tried to build a home on an unpredictable actor's income. By the time Magnum made him a star, they had already weathered more storms than many couples ever face. But fame, despite its rewards, is ruthless. 16-hour shoot days, endless publicity cycles, weeks away from home. Slowly the distance grew. First a missed dinner, then forgotten celebrations, then conversations cut short because he was too exhausted to stay awake. Tom never spoke publicly about private pain, but the people around him noticed. The way his shoulders seemed burdened by more than scripts, the sadness in his eyes during interviews, the hesitation whenever someone asked about his family. When the divorce came, it held no scandal, no cruelty, only the soundless breaking of two people who could no longer hold the same center. The tabloids called it irreconcilable differences. For Tom, it was losing the person who had known him before the world claimed him. "I thought we could hold on," he would say years later, but sometimes love and life stop meeting in the same place. There was no bitterness, only acceptance, the understanding that even the strongest bonds can fray under the weight of time, distance, and ambition. He remained a father to Kevin, honoring the promise he made the day he adopted him. Yet the silence of an empty home was unforgiving. Arriving just as his fame reached its peak, millions adored him, while privately he wondered how to rebuild the life that anchored him. Magnum's set became both a refuge and